Hey BookTube. So I'm coming back to you with another bookshelf tour, and I'm doing this one right after I finished my last one, where I showed you books on Reformation and Enlightenment history, and I'm going to be doing my medieval shelf this time, and I'm a little bit unhappy because it turns out as soon as I finished my doing that last video, I found out that my bookshelf seems to be pulling apart. And so the supports on the very back of the Reformation and Enlightenment shelf and this medieval shelf are all very unstable. Not enough to collapse them yet, but they're tottering on the edge, and so I need to clear off this medieval shelf of all its books and then try to get that fixed. I don't think I need to do that for any other shelf. They're all fairly stable. It's just for these two middle shelves that I need to work on. So I figured I might as well film myself going through all these books just to show you the next shelf on my shelf tour. And then it'll be like just getting it all done and showing you all my books at the same time. So it's just, hitting... well, without further ado, I'm going to show you my books. It's again a very stacked shelf. I have books all in front, books on top of the books, and then the actual shelf itself. And I'm going to start off from the right here, showing you all these Viking portables that I have. So there's 3 Viking portables. I have the Medieval Reader, edited by James Bruce Ross and Mary Martin McLaughton. So these are the only Viking portables I have or have ever seen. That's actually not true. I recently saw the Viking Faulkner in a hardcover, but I turned it aside because I don't really want any more Faulkner. I have lots of him. And then I have the Renaissance Reader in this same cover design. But this is also actually edited by the exact same people, by James Bruce Ross and Mary Martin McLaughton. So the same editors. And then we have the Portable Age of Reason Reader, which is now I think republished as the Enlightenment Reader, and this is edited by Crane Brinton, or Brinton. Yeah, it's an author that I am aware of, that I have a few of his books, but that he edits the Age of... all 3 of them are anthology readers that include a bunch of different stuff, like excerpts from works during each period. For example, the Enlightenment Reader has selections from Rousseau and Madison, Quincy, Adam Smith, from Kant, and from other characters that I've never even heard of, which is the appeal of these volumes, that you have the mixture of the familiar with the unfamiliar, and stuff that you usually wouldn't find anywhere else, which I find interesting. And then we get to the actual histories that are in front here. It's all just medieval history in different assortments, so it's there's not really any kind of method to the madness here. So the first book is Tom Holland's book Millennium, and it says, a quote here says, "Blaze of color lights in the Dark Ages," and it's one of Tom Holland's earlier books. It says, I'm not entirely sure what the period of history is on here, but I think it's around 900 AD, or 8900 to maybe 1100 AD, something like that. And then we also have this really interesting inset of the author on the cover, on the front cover here. So that's Tom Holland's book on Millennium. Where am I going to put these books? And then we have another Pimlico history book. I showed one of them in my last tour. This is another one that I have. This is Lancaster of York, The Wars of the Roses. Lancaster and York, The Wars of the Roses by Alison Weir. It's a well-loved one, as you can see, because the spine is all cracked. But the War of the Roses is an interesting period of English history, dramatized, of course, um, slightly through the plays of Shakespeare, or at least the results of the Wars of Roses. And then we have Life in a Medieval City by Francis Guise and Joseph Guise, and just a slim little volume. And then The Vikings by Robert Ferguson. The Vikings, this is blasphemous to say, as much as the medieval period interests me, the Vikings don't. It's not as much. They just seem kind of like this vulgar band of people who go around slaughtering people and stealing the goods from medieval cities around Europe on the coasts, and the Vikings don't interest me that much. So this is, I think, the only history of the Vikings that I actually have. Not to say I wouldn't buy more if I saw some used, but this is the only one that I've seen used, and I haven't gone out of my way to find any more, honestly. And then we get to The Great Mortality by John Kelly. This is a book on the Black Plague, or the Black Death. It says, an intimate history of the Black Death, the most devastating plague of all time. And it's just a short popular history on that. Then we get to a Renaissance history. So this is medieval and Renaissance shelf, but it's mostly medieval, and I also kind of consider the Renaissance as kind of like the end of the medieval period, depending on whether or not you stretch the Renaissance into the 1500s or not. But this is, anyways, the Book of the Renaissance, the Penguin Book of the Renaissance by J.H. Plum. If you might recognize that author name from one of his history of British history series in the Pelican books that I have. I had the three books in the Pelican British history book, history series or whatever, and he writes one of those volumes, and this is his book on the Renaissance. And then we have The 100 Years' War by Desmond Seward. This is part of a series of the brief history of, and I have a few books in that series. I have the brief history of science and a brief history of medicine, but this is the brief history of the 100 Years' War, and it really does take to its name because it's a very slim volume. A lot of these books are just bouncing around everywhere because I don't really have a place to put them. This is The Making of the Middle Ages by R.W. Southern. It's a slim book, but it's a book that seems to be in a lot of bibliographies when you go through medieval history books and you look through the bibliographies. This book is always on there. And then we have an obscure history book. This is The Economic and Social History of Medieval Europe by Henry Pirenne. Henry Pirenne. It's just a small little thing. And I wonder if this is translated, because the author sounds kind of French. Yes, it's translated from the French by I.E. Clegg, and published in 1936 in English. But it doesn't tell me when the original French was published, so that's all I got to go on. Then we have The Birth of the Middle Ages, 395 to 814, and it's got one of those, the author is one of those people who puts a ton of initials in the front of their name. So we got H.S.T.L. S.T., so Saint, L.B. Moss. I'm not entirely sure why someone would do that, but it was a thing back then. But yeah, it's a short history on the birth of the Middle Ages. And then we get to, I guess I should do the top books first. We have a hardcover book on the history of the Inquisition by Michael Bigent and Richard Lee and Begent. I'm butchering their names, but that's what you come to expect on this channel. And a few more books on top of the shelf, and then we can get to the shelf proper. This is The Medieval World. It's by Frederick Heer, H-E-E-R, and it's a mentor book, like a mass market history book. And the author is German, so I don't know if this is translated or not. Yes, it is. Translated by Janet Sondheimer. Janet Sondheimer. And it's the medieval world from 1100 to 1350. And it was translated in 1962. So, a little mass market history of the medieval period. Then we get to an interesting series put out by Cambridge a while back. It's called the Cambridge Medieval Textbooks Series, and this is their volume on political thought in Europe, from 1250 to 1450, and it's by Anthony Black. And they're slim books, usually, but they have a bunch of books in the series that go from like Eastern Europe and Russian history to history that you would expect in like Western Europe and British history. They have a volume on chivalry that I would like to have, but I don't have currently. But yeah, it's a Cambridge, put out by Cambridge University Press. They all have that decal there, and they all have that border, and with the white contrast with some kind of color and an image. So they all kind of a uniform look to them. And then we have The Italian Renaissance and Its Historical Background by Denise Hay, or Denise Hay. It's Dennis, but with a Y. So I don't know if that changes the pronunciation of this name, but it's a short history of Renaissance. Just a thin little book here. I don't even know if it's... No, it's barely 200 pages. That's funny, because I just opened up to here, and someone wrote, underlined in pen, and then writes in capital letters, Erasmus. I didn't actually see that this was annotated before. That's kind of funny. And then we get more Erasmus. This person just gets all excited when they find Erasmus in their books. That's great. I wonder if Christopher Russell had that book before I did, because that would make sense of all the needless excitement over Erasmus. But I think I'm going to go from left to right, because we're, 13 minutes in and we haven't got to the shelf proper. This is a massive textbook, massive as in size. It's a short history of the Middle Ages, as in width, not as in how fat it is. It's fat this way, not this way. So it's a short history of the Middle Ages by Barbara Rosenheim, and it's the 4th edition, and just enormous. But it's also full of illustrations because it's got the glossy pages, and so the illustrations can be in color. Yeah, there we go. Bunch of illustrations and maps and stuff. So this will be a treat to read. This is put out by University of Toronto Press. And then we have the Oxford Illustrated History of Medieval Europe. So it's another big book with illustrations in it, but it's an older book. It's not as floppy or as well made. And it's edited by George Holmes. From what I understand, it means that a scholar would write, or an essay, a different scholar would write an essay for a different period of history. Yeah, that's right. So there's 6 scholarly essays in here, and they just go in chronological order. So the first essay goes from 400 to 900. The next essay goes from the same period, but just different. So the first one is on the transformation of the Roman Mediterranean, and the second essay is the Northern Worlds of the Dark Ages, both from 400 to 900. And then after that we have the Society of Northern Europe in the High Middle Ages from 900 to 1200. And then in the same period we have Northern Europe invades the Mediterranean, 900 to 1200. And then the last two essays here go from 1200 to 1500, and they both focus on the Mediterranean and the North. So, the Oxford Illustrated History. Let's see, what kind of illustrations do they have? All in color. Yeah, very nice. Very nice. I just ducked underneath the camera, which is one of the major sins of BookTube, but I had to organize my book piles that are on the floor because I literally have no room to put these books. I have books all over. But anyways, books and all over, meaning that I've taken them off the shelf, not that I usually have books on the floor. I'm a little bit more neat than that. This is another oversized textbook. This is Europe in the Middle Ages, and it's by Robert Hoyt and Stanley Chodorow. And it's neat because it's a naked hardcover. So then you have all this cool illustration all along the book. Yeah, it looks like a bunch of knights fighting. And I don't know if this one is illustrated. Kind of. It's got a map there. Let's see if I can find another thing. Oh yeah. Here's a black and white image of a rundown castle. That's pretty cool. And then the endnote papers are maps of Europe. This is Europe from 1814, and then the other one that I showed you was Europe from 1250. So then just by looking at the end papers, you get a little bit of an idea of the progress of how the borders changed. Then we come to just a hardcover of medieval history. This is Seven Medieval Kings by Joseph Domus, and it says a panoramic view of the Middle Ages through the lives of its most important and colorful monarchs. And if I remember, they actually left out a very important monarch here that quite surprised me. Let's see if I can see who it is. Yeah, they got Justinian, they got Harun al-Rashid, Charlemagne, Henry II, Frederick II, Louis the IX, and Louis the XI. Yeah, I was looking for where's Alfred the Great, but I guess he's not considered important enough when this book was written. When was it written? 1967. And then another hardcover. This is the Penguin History of Europe. This is Europe in the High Middle Ages. Europe in the High Middle Ages. And it's by William Chester Jordan. So yeah, the Penguin History of Europe. And then we get to, uh-oh, is this shelf gonna collapse on me? That would make for some very entertaining BookTube. Like the time when Steve Donahue was recording a video and one of his shelves, one of his bookcases basically collapsed on the floor. But anyways, this is Europe After Rome, A New Cultural History, 500 to 1000. And this is by Julia M.H. Smith. Europe After Rome by Julia M.H. Smith. And we got an image of our author there on the back. And it's published by Oxford, and it's just a cultural history after Rome. So it's medieval history. And I love picking up these kinds of books. It doesn't seem to be illustrated, but like buying this brand new or used online would cost me at least $20-$30. And getting it used for what? I think I got it. Yeah, $2.50. That's like, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I grab that book? And then we have another book of medieval history, Medieval Europe and the World, and it's by two authors here, Robin Winks and Teofilo Ruiz. And it says from late antiquity to modernity, 400 to 1500. So you see how people try to, when they write books on the medieval period, how different the ages are. So our previous book went from 500 to 1000. This book goes from 400 to 1500. And then all the other books on the shelf will be sort of randomized like that. For example, this, let's go show this one here. This is Europe, Western Europe in the Middle Ages, 300 to 1475. So that idea of when the medieval period starts to when it ends is always kind of blurry when it comes to histories like this, like overarching histories. And this is by Brian Tierney. And it's an oversized book, and this is the 7th edition. So there's many other editions, but I like, if you can see in the light there, there's an illustration there that shines. Also on the, over here too, yeah, there. But yeah, I don't know if this one is illustrated either. Maybe a little, but not a whole lot. We get a map here occasionally. And then we have The Worlds of Medieval Europe by Clifford Bachman. Worlds of Medieval Europe. This is one of the more modern textbooks that I have, because it is a textbook, as you can tell with the stickers that you can never ever get off, and that are on the spine. And then they also stamp it on every single edge, just so you know that this book is used from a college bookstore. And if that wasn't enough, you also have the absolute wall of neon highlighting. I don't know if you can see that, but there's yellow highlighting all along these pages. This is technically just a placeholder volume, because I do actually have another volume of this book, but it's weirdly, it's printed differently. It's the exact book. I believe it's still the 2nd edition, but it's probably twice as thick as this, because this is made in a very floppy format with thin, glossy pages, while the other edition that I have is thicker. The paper is a lot thicker, the pages are not glossy, and it doesn't have any of this on it, nor does it have any of that highlighting on it. But I keep this one on the volume, I keep this one on the shelf because it fits on the shelf. If I had to put the other one on the shelf, it would mess up the entire shelf. I'd have to take one of the big books and like put it on the side or something. It would just be a mess. So it's easier to keep this on the shelf as a placeholder. I doubt I'll actually read this volume, and I'll just read it in the other volume that I have. It's right across the room over there. I just don't want to leave the camera again, because then Steve will be yelling at me, yelling at his laptop, and we don't want to aggravate Steve, now do we? So now we have more medieval history. It's just all books called medieval history, so I can't really add all that much variation. But this one tries to make itself sound interesting. It says Mysteries of the Middle Ages, and it says, and the Beginnings of the Modern World. And it's by Thomas Cahill. This is the author of the best-selling How the Irish Saved Civilization, which seemed kind of like clickbaity almost in its title, so I didn't bother to, whenever I see that book about the Irish saving civilization, I didn't bother to pick it up. But this book here, on the Middle Ages, it's right in my wheelhouse, so I'll give this one a try. And this one actually does have some cool color inset illustrations here, which I guess is like an absolute requirement if you're going to write a book on medieval history, because the whole book, because normally the idea is that the medieval history is so boring that you're going to need some distraction. So like, look at this map. That's a beautiful printing of a map. And do I get more? Yeah, just everywhere. You got some really neat illustrations and colors and everything. Yeah, very nice, nicely printed book. Then we have a slim little monograph by the aforementioned Robert Bartlett. He was on our Reformation shelf. It was his book on the Cult of the Saints. This one here is a slim little volume on the natural and the supernatural in the Middle Ages. And it's just a small volume put out by Cambridge, which is actually a transcription or reworking of lectures that he did in 2000 at a conference in 2006. So it says the Wileys lectures given at the Queen's University of Belfast in 2006. And it's just a slim little working of that study, which is something that I'm very interested in. I'm very interested in the Middle Ages, but also of their religious life, because if you think about it, their religious life was just completely dominant. It was everything to the Middle Ages, in the Middle Ages, and to the people who lived there. It was impossible to escape it. And then we have another volume just called Medieval Europe. It's a squat little hardcover by Martin Scott. And I don't know a whole lot about this book, other than that it was very cheap to purchase. And it was published in 1964. And it doesn't have any illustrations whatsoever, which is not a bad thing. At least to me, it's not a bad thing, but it's just a random little volume called Medieval Europe. It can't even be required as a textbook, because I don't think they make textbooks in squat little hardcovers like this. And then we have, if you've read a book on the Middle Ages, this is probably that book. There's a few other contenders, but this is the one that I can think of that have the widest appeal. It's The Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman, and it says the calamitous 14th century. And it's one of these older style paperbacks. I really like the modern reprint volume of this, which is basically the Orange Spine Penguin, but it's got a really nice front cover to it. Very nice look to it. This one is fine. It's decent, but it's not like the modern edition, though the modern edition is very expensive. And I got this volume here for $1, and it's in perfect condition. So, and then we got a map. And she only has the inset color, or black and white photos. We don't have the spot illustrations throughout. Yeah, this is Barbara Tuchman's The Distant Mirror. And then we move on to Civilization of the Middle Ages, or The Civilization of the Middle Ages by Norman F. Cantor. And it says a completely revised and expanded edition of medieval history. So this was originally published as a textbook called Medieval History, and then he completely revises it a number of decades later, and it's put into a popular press edition of this book. So let's see when it was. It was originally published in the 60s, the textbook, but this modernization was done in 1993. So there's that. And then we get into some actual keyhole histories combined with our textbooks, our overgeneralized textbook approach. So a few of these books here are very specific. Like this one here, it's called The Ties That Bind, or The Ties That Bound. And it says Peasant Families in Medieval England, and it's by Barbara Hannawalt. And it's fairly slim, but it's just an Oxford paperback of a study of a very specific time and focus in medieval history. And again, it's one of these books that I just found used. It was very cheap, and I picked it up. Same as this next one here. It's the life cycle in Western Europe from 1300 to 1500, and it's by Deborah Youngs. And I really do like that cover where you have the mixture of the old man holding the child there. It's a really nice cover. And then we have another book in the... It seems like at some point many publishers have a history of Europe reprint line or history line where they publish books by historians in specific periods in European history, and then have like this overarching series. We saw a few of them before already, and this is another one. This is by St. Martin's Press. This is their Early Medieval Europe volume. It says A History of Europe, and then this is their Early Medieval Europe, 300 to 1000, and it's by Roger Collins. And this is St. Martin's Press, and it does seem like it's kind of stiff, and it feels like it's meant to be another textbook idea. And then we have another overgeneralization. We have Medieval Europe 1400 to 1500, or no, 400 to 1500 by H.G. Koenigsberger. Koenigsberger. I'm just not German. I'm not German, and I'm sorry to all the Germans who are watching this. And it just says A History of Europe. I think this is part of a series as well. Yeah, it's a History of Europe series, and this author here is one of the editors, but he writes this volume from that series. I wonder if I should go from the right end. Oh, I don't know. I just don't want this shelf to collapse, because it seems like it is on the verge of collapse. Then we have another generalized history of Europe. This is the Middle Ages by Maurice Bishop, and it's a thinner one, but it's published by Mariner Books, so it's not like a textbook or anything. It looks like it was meant to be more popular. And we got a little bit of fairly poorly done illustrations. Poorly done in the sense that it doesn't look like it's very clear. It's just black and white and pixelated. When was this published? 1968. So another medieval book from the 60s. Then we get to an actual gem. Gem in the sense that it's a very modern book, but it's also a work in translation. And I've heard some really good things about it. This is The Middle Ages by Johannes Fried. Another German name. Did I butcher that one? Let me know. And it's translated by Peter Lewis. Peter Lewis, whose name is there at the very bottom. And it's just a modern history of the Middle Ages. Like a modern, as in 2015 is when this was first published. And the original book itself, like in German, was published in 2009, but the translation was published in 2015, and this is published by the Belknap Press of Harvard. So a university press, modern history of Europe, or modern medieval European history. And we're still not done the shelf. At 33 minutes, we're still not done. Another book by Norman F. Cantor. This is Inventing the Middle Ages. And the subtitle here says The Lives, Works, and Ideas of Great Medievalists of the 20th Century. And the premise of this book here, from what I understand, is that he studies people, big names from the 20th century who popularized medieval history. So this book was published in 1991, so the 20th century was not done when he wrote this book. But I want to see, so he goes through different scholars and I guess he studies their approach to medieval history. And he goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 names. 20 names from the 20th century, and some of them that you would recognize. For example, C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien are on here. They are part of they are part of Chapter 6 called the Oxford Fantasists. So I guess fantasy, but fantasists. And then there's also Richard William Southern, which we saw his book just recently on the shelf. His book on the medieval. He gets a whole entire chapter to himself, chapter 9. And then another character on here, we'll see his book, his most famous book. I might as well just show it to you. This author here, The Waning of the Middle Ages by Huizinga, J. Huizinga. And it's a nice hardcover of this book. Johann Huizinga. This is one of the most popular books, medieval history books from the 20th century, and this was sort of like a bastardized, translated version of the original. And so, within the past, 15 years, I believe, they came out with a brand new translation of this book, but based on the actual original German edition, instead of this kind of heavily edited version that was published back in the 60s, I believe. No, even later, 1920s, 1924. So 1924. Recently, Chicago University Press republished this in a different translation with different editorship that wanted to go back to the actual original one, because when this was translated into English, there was a lot of manipulation or changing, and it was not as in like shady scholarship. The author himself was very much involved in that process, and I'm not entirely sure why, but that's just how it came out. So then this book here in the original translation does not correlate to the actual book that was published in the original language, which is either German or Dutch, I can't remember. But anyways, yeah, he's one of the authors that is studied in here as well. That's all I want to say. Then we move on to a book that I'm very happy to have found. This is Medieval Foundations of the Western Intellectual Tradition, and it goes from 400 to 1400 by Marcia Kolisch, and it's part of the Yale Intellectual History of the West series, which is a series that ended up only publishing 3 books. They had a lot more that were in the works, but the series, it seemed to end up just died. Like, it didn't take off very well. And this is the only volume, I believe, that's still in print. That you could just go online and buy this online with relative ease. The other 2 volumes are very hard to get your hands on. Let's see if I can find. Yeah, so because it promises 5 books here that are forthcoming, but none of them ended up actually getting published. So it was a promising series, something that I'm very interested in. Like, the intellectual history of the West is, it's my bread and butter. So it's too bad that didn't end up happening. Then we have another niche history of medieval history. This is Medieval Families. It's an edited volume, so it's got a bunch of essays by scholars. It's perspectives on marriage, household, and children, and it's edited by Carol Neal. And then these are all the contributors here. How many essays does it have? It's got 11 essays, not including the introduction. And we got some names here that we actually know, like Mary Martin McLaughlin, the editor of the medieval portable medieval reader. I don't recognize any other names though. Yeah, we're just gonna continue. We have another interesting keyhole history of the medieval period. This is The Medieval Machine, and it's a Pimlico, one of those Pimlico books with the black and the colored design here. And this is The Industrial Revolution of the Middle Ages by Jean Gimpel. Was this book translated? Did Jean... Doesn't look like it. No. But it was published in 1976, so an older medieval book focusing on technology. And then we have another textbook-like book, but it's focusing on medieval monasticism, and it's by C.H. Lawrence. and this is the 3rd edition. So it says forms of religious life in Western Europe in the Middle Ages. Medieval monasticism is... You can't study the medieval period without talking about the medieval monks and all the different variations that there were. And then we come to, I'm sad to say, the only book on the shelf that I've actually read. The problem is because I've accumulated books at an alarmingly... an alarming rate faster than I can read them. So then, this is the only book I've actually read on this entire shelf. And it's The History of Medieval Europe by R.H.C. Davis. And it says from Constantine to St. Louis, or St. Louis. And yeah, like I have tons of annotations all along this book. But it's the only medieval book of mine in my collection that I've actually read from front to back. I did try reading the Middle Ages book that I showed you that was translated by Peter Lewis. Was it, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was the Belknap Press, Harvard University Press book, the modern one from 2015. And I just was completely lost in that first chapter. And so I went back to a textbook, which gives you the chronological history, and just gives you all the details that you need to know. Because it seemed like that Middle Ages volume was trying, the previous one that I tried reading, was trying to be a lot more artful with the history, and which I'm fine with. But it works a lot better when you know the history, the basics of the history, which I didn't at the time. So then we get into a few Renaissance books. The last 3 books on my shelf here are Renaissance books. We have The Civilization of Europe and the Renaissance by John Hale. Just a nice big fat book on the Italian Renaissance. This is very illustrated. Like there's illustrations everywhere. The interesting thing is that this is actually still in print, but you can also buy a illustrated, like a widened hardcover illustrated edition of this, where I guess the illustrations would be bigger and in color. But I'm perfectly fine with this volume here, because it is a meaty work. Like there's still a lot of print, right? But when you study the Renaissance, it's kind of hard to do that without actually seeing the artwork and whatever that's being talked about. And then we come to a biography. This is The Collector of the Lives. It's Giorgio Vasari and The Invention of Art. And it's by Ingrid Roland and Noah Charney. And it's a nice hardcover biography of this artist and writer in the Renaissance period. He's most famous for, at least to me, because I'm more involved in literature than in art, he's famous for me, at least, as the author of the ginormous Lives of the Artists series, where he wrote short biographies of prominent artists of the time in his period. And it's still reprinted by Penguin Classics, and I think Oxford does a volume, but none of them reprint the entire thing, because it was ginormous, and like well over half of the artists are completely forgotten these days. So usually in reprint volumes they only reprint the more famous lives, and this is a biography of the man who wrote that. But the thing is, he was also an artist himself. Like this is, I believe, a self-portrait of him painting. So he did a lot of art himself. Like he wasn't just a writer. So that's an interesting find, or interesting buy. And then the last book is, again, we bookend our shelves. The last shelf book ended with this same author. This is Will Durant, and it's the Renaissance, the volume, in The Story of Civilization. So this is the history of the Renaissance. I don't actually have their medieval history. So Will and Ariel Durant did an entire series called The Story of Civilization. I think it's done in like 11 volumes or something. And it only stopped because the authors themselves both passed away, and they both died in a very short time. They only got up to the age of Napoleon. And at one point, at least like halfway through, Will Durant ended up including his wife Ariel Durant as one of the co-authors because she was taking an increasing role in publishing these books as well. And as you can see here, so all these, I think the first 6 volumes, he put just his name on there. And then after that, Ariel took was included as a co-author. So, yeah, that's the last book on the shelf. That's it for this shelf. That's all my medieval history books. It's a lot. I intend to go through them all because the medieval period really does excite me a lot, and it's hard to explain why. But I think I'm going to try and fix my bookshelf now that I have these 2 shelves that are empty. I can try and manipulate in order to actually hold books properly. So we'll see you next time, BookTube.